Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, so today we're diving into a massive, frankly, fundamental transformation happening right now in the world of university education. We're talking about a major shift away from those isolated, traditional ivory towers and moving toward active, really impactful community ecosystems. To wrap our heads around this, we're going to explore two critical frameworks, specifically two higher education practice standards, or HEPS, that are completely reshaping how universities interact with the world and how students actually learn.
We've got a double feature lined up for you today. First, the setup. Then Act 1 covering engaged institutions. Act 2 on experiential learning. And finally, shaping the future.
All right, Part 1, the setup. To really get the why behind all of this, we've got to look at the Council on Higher Education, or the CHE. They're basically the architects driving this whole transformation. The CHE has rolled out a quality assurance framework designed specifically to align the traditional academic project with a much broader social purpose. Because let's face it, the goal here isn't just to hand out degrees anymore. It's about building a sustainable, equitable social order by making sure university practices actually matter locally, continentally, and globally.
Which brings us to Part 2, Act 1, Engaged Institutions.
So for a long time, universities kind of operated on these purely transactional interactions, right? Extractive top-down models where they'd essentially swoop into a community, gather up some data, and take off. But the real game changer with this new standard is the shift to meaningful engagement. We're talking reciprocal, two-way relationships here. A truly engaged institution gets that local communities already hold incredibly valuable knowledge. So engagement becomes the shared journey where both sides learn, grow, and tackle problems together.
This whole vision is anchored by 6 core principles. Basically, engagement has to be mutual, ethical, transformative, socially just, pluriversal, and collaborative. Now, I really want to zoom in on that 5th one for a second, pluriversal. It's a fantastic concept. It literally means actively making space for diverse ways of knowing to coexist side by side. It's about breaking down old colonial legacies and treating indigenous, local, and non-Western knowledge with the exact same respect as standard Western traditions. It really brings historically marginalized voices right to the front of the conversation.
And honestly, this hits the nail on the head regarding the ultimate social justice goal of this first standard. When an institution actually lives by those 6 principles, it doesn't just, sit back in an ivory tower and observe society's flaws through a microscope. It actively goes after inequity and exploitation. It makes absolutely sure that higher education isn't just a mirror reflecting existing divides, but an actual powerful engine driving fairness, inclusion, and empowerment.
Moving right along to Part 3, Act 2, Experiential Learning.
Okay, so we really need to pin down what we actually mean by experiential learning here, because we're moving way past the old idea of just shipping a student off for a traditional summer internship. We're leaning heavily on educational theorist David Kolb's definition here. The process whereby knowledge is created through the transformation of experience. It's totally holistic. You don't just do a task, you reflect on it, you conceptualize it, and you actively transform that raw, real-world experience into deep, lasting knowledge.
So how does this actually look in practice? Well, it brilliantly bridges the gap between abstract textbook theory and messy reality, using this powerful little trio: learning by feeling, thinking, and doing. It literally forces the learner to jump right into problem-solving scenarios. It pulls out what they already believe, tests it against the real world, and blends it with new ideas. It is so dynamic, so interactive, and honestly, it's just how human brains are wired to learn best in the first place.
Now, historically in South Africa, this kind of thing got shoved into a box labeled Work-Integrated Learning, or WIL. But this new standard completely blows the lid off that old box. Experiential learning is now this massive umbrella. Yes, it includes WIL, but it also validates dynamic stuff like problem-based learning, action learning, service learning, and even simulated virtual learning. This gives universities the freedom to design experiences that are tailor-made for their specific students and disciplines. Because let's be real, technology has completely rewritten what practical experience even looks like today.
And crucially, none of this experiential learning is happening in a vacuum. It operates in this amazing concentric ecosystem. Think of it as starting right at the center with the higher education microsystem. That's the student and the university. But as they learn by doing, that student's impact ripples outward into their local community, then further out to industry and civil society, until it's eventually feeding into this massive outer ring, wider knowledge creation for society as a whole. It's all connected.
And that brings us to Part 4, Shaping the Future.
So, we've just looked at two totally separate frameworks today, one looking at how the institution engages and one looking at how students learn. But at the end of the day, they share one absolutely vital, unifying goal. You see, the generative capacity of higher education is just essential right now. When a university genuinely becomes an engaged institution and when it actually embeds experiential learning into its core, it creates these incredibly adaptable, well-rounded graduates. We're talking about people armed not just with abstract theories, but with the practical chops, the ethical grounding, and that pluriversal awareness we talked about, all of which are required to actually generate lasting solutions to the crazy complex problems of our 21st century.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you, whether you're a university leader, an academic, or just a stakeholder in our future, with a really generative question pulled straight from these guidelines. Just something to chew on. How does your institution actively challenge inequity rather than perpetuating it? It's a huge, bold question, right? But answering it through genuine engagement and transformative learning is exactly how higher education is going to build a better world. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.